Hi, this is Henry Seltzer. Welcome to another installment of these Transformational Astrology video blogs. Today we're going to talk about the full moon that's upcoming, which has a number of interesting features. And before we get into that, I'd like to also mention something about retrograde planets, which is an interesting topic, I think. The purpose of these presentations is actually to give you a look at the underpinnings of what astrologers do when they look at charts, how that works, and how we come to some of the conclusions we come to when we make our prognostications. And retrograde planets are, of course, an important part of that. Right now, there's a lot of intense astrology that's happening, so the summer is an unusually intense time. And I want to mention also that when intense things happen, we have the chance to rise above. It's very important. We do have that choice. And I live in the community of Santa Cruz, which has been, as many of you know, been hit by terrible tragedy in the recent days, something that's almost impossible to comprehend. And it's difficult, and it's important that we react to these kind of events with compassion, that we understand that there is a benevolence to the cosmos, and that we treat what happens with compassion and not with bitterness. I think that's very important, and one thing that astrology can do to help us navigate these difficult times that our culture is currently going through. Well, as we talk about the summer, the summer is normally a time of relaxation and play and not worrying about things too much, but this is a very intense summer. The astrological currents are quite intense, the outer planet combinations with inner, and the retrogrades are part of that. Right now, Uranus is getting ready to retrograde. Uranus is already retrograded, and so has Venus retrograded on the 25th of July recently. Saturn is getting ready to retrograde this weekend on Saturday. So these are important times because when outer planets retrograde, they move quite slowly. They come to a standstill. That's what the word station means. Comes to a standstill in the sky, and they are therefore more powerful for that period of time surrounding the actual moment of the retrograde, the actual station. Saturn is stationing to direct motion. Uranus is stationing retrograde. And at the same time, the new planet Eris is with Uranus stationing retrograde. And these are times when these planets come to prominence. They're more seeming to affect our lives. Actually, they move in synchronicity with our lives. And the slow-moving planets are more powerful and more important in our prognostications. Now, it's different with an inner planet retrograde, such as the Venus retrograde that's happening right now. As you know, when Mercury retrogrades, things go awry as far as meetings, as far as mechanical situations. Computers don't function as well, some seemingly. It's a way that our mental capacities are almost reversed or taken to an underworld situation. Logic does not prevail. Well, it's similar with Venus retrograde because Venus, about relationships primarily, about beauty and art as well, has a sort of an underside to it, which comes out with a retrograde, which is really the subject is our unconscious process. This is what Jung and Freud talked about early in the 1900s. This is something that underlies our behavior, that it's really hidden to our conscious gaze, but it becomes more accessible during the retrograde time of Venus. What is the undercurrents of our relationship energy? It could be that things come up from the past, either in our thoughts or an actual occurrence. We might meet somebody, an ex-lover from the past, or we might meet a new person that actually has a lot, that new relationship has a lot to do with things that have happened in the past, and we can reflect on that. So it's a very good and profitable time in a certain way to reflect on what is the underpinning of everything that's happening to us. How can we see into a little bit more what we are about, what this life is about, what our purpose is here. And that's one thing we can take out of these retrograde times. Now let's take a look at the full moon coming up. So as we take a look at this full moon, this is for Friday. It's very early in the morning, 3:43 in the morning on the West Coast. Of course, it'll be 3 hours later on the East Coast, 8 hours later in Europe, in England at least, and so on. What we can see is that the sun and the moon are exactly opposite. at Leo, in 8 degrees or so of Leo and 8 degrees of Aquarius. And what's very interesting is also Venus is retrograde just at the very edge of Virgo, and since it's moving backwards, it will start moving backwards through Leo right after the full moon. And in fact, Jupiter's sitting right there at 27 degrees of Leo, only 3 degrees away, so they will be coming toward each other. And that will be showing in the night sky. You'll be able to see that getting closer and closer together toward the 4th of August, which is when they will conjunct. So then we also notice, though, that Saturn at 28 degrees of Scorpio is square to these points that Venus is going to be traveling through. So what we have in this full moon configuration is a very strong, powerful Saturn square Venus-Jupiter combination, bringing out the Jupiter-Saturn square that's going on right now in much stronger terms. And Saturn with Jupiter, we can think of it as a loss of faith. Our challenge is to maintain our faith. We can think of it as also bringing the sense of what the society is up to into our consciousness very much so that everything we do, we can also be reflecting at this time on how that affects the society, how the society affects us as well. It's a political time. And it is also a time of looking within, as the Venus retrograde indicates, and a time when we will be frustrated to some extent and we will be running into limitations as we attempt to navigate these times because of the strong Saturn presence. Now Neptune is another strong presence. Neptune is over here in Pisces at 9 degrees, and because the full moon is at 8 degrees of Aquarius, 8 degrees of Leo, that's a semi-sextile, that's an inconjunct or a quincunx aspect from the Sun to Neptune. So Neptune is very prominent right now as well, which refers back to a dream imagination, refers back to unconscious process, especially located in its own sign of Pisces. So we have a strong undercurrent of what's happening below the surface of our normal lives and how that affects us in ways that we can only conjecture and dwell upon, including how our relationships are structured. I'd like to mention a couple of resources that are available talking about retrograde planets. Aaron Sullivan's book called Retrograde Planets is actually a terrific resource. And another really good description of what really the inner meaning of Venus is can be found in Liz Green and Howard Sesportis. It's called The Inner Planets. So I recommend those two books extremely well. And then, of course, there's the book that I just finished on the new planet Eris, which is called The 10th Planet, Revelations from the Astrological Eris. Then also we have our software, which has tons of meanings for all these different things. We don't deal with retrograde specifically, but we do deal with the meanings of Venus in each of the houses in combination with the other planets in your chart. And that's the Time Passages astrology software for both Mac and Windows, and available also on the iPhone. Thanks very much. Talk to you soon.